So good evening, everyone. Today is March 3rd, 2021, and we have yet another meeting of Central Jersey Electric Auto Association. We have full agenda. Today, we will have a special guest from EnergyX, Teague Egan. He's the CEO of EnergyX, and he's going to talk about the company business, which is the rapid extraction of lithium. It's lithium ion transport and separation technology. Then we will talk about road trips in an EV, tips and tricks. I'll go through chair report. I'll talk about some recent meetings of Electric Auto, national meetings and chapter development meetings. And we need to start getting ready for the spring events for Drive Electric Earth Day, etc. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Teague Egan. He's the founder and CEO of EnergyX, and he's responsible for all aspects of building the company into the world leader in renewable energy technologies. Teague's background is one of serial entrepreneurship, investing, inventing, and philanthropy, and he has been investing in public sector energy assets and sustainable technologies since 2013. So, Teague, shall I put you on spotlight?
That was a very kind introduction. I don't know if we're going to be the world leader, but we certainly hope to help out with some of the supply chain in terms of lithium production. Yeah, so, okay, I guess I'm on the spotlight. I'll share my screen. I have if you could just enable the screen sharing for me. My screen sharing is still disabled. There we go.
I realized I was on mute.
Yeah, you were on mute the whole time.
Yeah, okay. But I'm glad that we figured it out.
Cool, so we're good. So yeah, thank you. I'm honored to be here and present to you guys a little bit about my company that we've been building over the past few years. I started EnergyX 3 years ago, and with the intention of focusing my time and efforts on the renewable energy transition. I've been a Tesla owner since 2013, and I knew that this is the sector that I wanted to dedicate my career to. So the way we fit in is somewhat early on in the supply chain. We focus on two technologies. One is direct lithium extraction, and the other is solid state batteries, and specifically electrolytes, or the separator between the electrodes. And the direct lithium extraction is where we focus most of our time and effort. It's the first products that we're bringing to market, and followed by hopefully a battery initiative. But I pose a question, and that's, do you know where lithium comes from? And this is a question that I didn't know the answer to for quite a long time. First, I like to talk a little bit about lithium. There's a reason that it is one of the most important materials in batteries. And that happens to be because it's the lightest alkali metal on the periodic table. So it inherently has properties that make it advantageous for energy density. And as you guys know, when you're traveling in a car, you need as light of a battery as possible, so that the car can carry a lighter load. As I started to learn more about EVs and the batteries that are inside them, I found that it takes 10,000 iPhone batteries to make one electric vehicle car battery. So I say that because, we're going to need millions of tons of lithium if we're going to hit our goals of millions of EVs in the oncoming 5, 10, 20 years. And that's obviously reflected in global demand projections, where we are today, about 300,000 tons, and where the experts think that the demand will be in that time period. So again, I had no idea where lithium came from. Maybe some of you do, but I found out when I was traveling to Bolivia. And I was in the high deserts of one of the largest salt flats in the world, Salar de Uyuni. And my tour guide starts telling me about how this is the world's largest lithium reserve. And it was kind of my aha moment. I didn't know where lithium came from, but now I felt like I was standing in Saudi Arabia in the 1960s. Like, to me, that is where all of the renewable energy transition is going to come from. That's kind of the starting point. And right now, about 50% of the world's lithium comes from there, and it's looking to be a lot higher because 70% of the entire world's lithium reserves are found in a place known as the Lithium Triangle, which is between Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia. And this was a total shock to me. I really thought that this was the next Saudi Arabia. So then I started to find out and do some research on how this lithium is currently produced. And right here, you're looking at one of the largest lithium mines in the entire world. This is run by SQM, which is the second largest lithium producer behind Albemarle. And what I found was that it takes about 18 months for the salt brine that contains the lithium to run through this series of evaporation ponds. And what was more surprising to me is that not only is this obviously very environmentally harmful, but it only recovers 30% of the available lithium. And when I found that out, I knew that there had to be a better way to do that. There had to be a better mousetrap than these antiquated evaporation ponds that literally use natural evaporation to produce the lithium that is in all of our batteries. And I asked myself, where is the technology? So I thought back to my backyard in California, where I lived at the time, these massive desalination plants that could take salty ocean water, run them through a membrane, and create fresh drinking water. And I said, if we have membranes that can separate all the salts from water, then why can't we have membranes that separate just the targeted salts that we want, i.e. the lithium? So that's what I started working on. And I started searching for people that were working on this problem. I said, let's just separate the lithium or the targeted salt species that we want. And that's what led to me coming across a group at the University of Texas that was working on this exact technology. And EnergyX was able to license this technology and build upon it and take it from the small university level up to scaling it for commercial production. So how the technology works. Basically, we've developed membranes that have embedded nanoparticles called metal organic frameworks, which are a relatively new class of materials that have shown lithium separations as high as 1,000 to 1 versus the other salts that are mixed in the salt brine. So when we run the brine through it, essentially all the lithium passes through and all of the unwanted impurities are rejected. So we put those metal organic frameworks into mixed matrix membrane format, similar to what a reverse osmosis membrane may look like. Those membranes are then put into modules and modules into racks of modules. And what we're able to do now is recover 90% of the available lithium, as opposed to the 30% that is currently recovered in the ponds. Now, this is obviously a much smaller footprint than the ponds. Those ponds that I showed you earlier are 15 square miles. And to think about that, that's the size of the entire city of Manhattan, from downtown to north of Central Park. The other key aspect is that this only takes a few days, as opposed to these long, months-long or years-long cycle. So it's really a step change technology. And the way that I like to think about this is, we've essentially created the equivalent of fracking, not in terms of the environmental side, where fracking is kind of frowned upon in terms of its pollution, but in terms of making the current system exponentially more efficient. When fracking was introduced, they went from producing 1x oil and gas to 5 or 10x oil and gas. And that's what we've done here. You can't get to millions of electric vehicles without producing substantially more, exponentially more lithium. So the way that our current process works is, right now, there's a series of evaporation ponds. And we decided that the best way to do this was to create a complementary approach at first, where we fit our system in mid-pond cascade. And the reason for that is because most of the big lithium producers today, they don't want to just get rid of their ponds and write that off on their balance sheet as a sunk cost. So we made an approach where we get our foot in the door and we have we fit into the pond cascade right before the major loss of lithium. However, once the ponds are completely maximized in terms of their efficiency, nobody wants to build more ponds. So that's where our generation 2 comes in. And we've looked at this as a stepped approach, right? Once our technology is proven and is commercially viable in the field, then these are our partners, and we can work towards new greenfield operations to bring on the necessary capacity that demand will dictate. And then generation 3 is basically just further optimizing and taking out steps in the process, mainly the lithium carbonate step. So if you guys are driving a Tesla, that means that there's lithium hydroxide in your battery as opposed to lithium carbonate. But currently, you have to go through the lithium carbonate step to get to lithium hydroxide. And this step right here, it makes up about 50% of the OpEx and the CapEx of the process. So if you can eliminate this step and go straight from the brine to hydroxide, that's a further step that we're looking at. So ultimately, we're working on lithium refinery, and there are a few other key advantages to our technology other than the time comparison and the recovery rate. One big one that I just want to highlight is the fresh water needed. These ponds are in places that are really scarce in fresh water. They're in high deserts, and right now it takes about 18,000 gallons per ton of lithium produced. With us, we're looking at about 800 gallons per ton of lithium produced. So that's another key advantage that's really attractive to some of our customers. So with that, I'll wrap it up and leave a couple minutes for questions. On our website, we have a resource guide that can also answer some questions. But again, I thank you for your time, and I'll open up the floor for some questions.
Thank you, Teague, for the overview.
Is this out of the lab yet?
Yeah, so we are putting pilot plants in the field this year. We have pilot plants in the lab. We call them lab pilots, but they're the same ones that we will containerize and put into the field. Right now, we're testing brine that's being shipped to us from all of the major customers because we want to make sure that it works in our lab with a few tons of brine before we ship it out and do, you know, hundreds of tons over a 6 to 12 month period.
When do you anticipate having field installations?
This summer.
Huh?
This summer.
Okay.
How would you compare this technology to what Elon Musk was talking about during the battery day?
It's a good question. So, what he described in terms of his lithium extraction was pretty much sprinkle table salt onto the clay that contains the lithium, and out comes the lithium. They didn't really dive too deep into it. I'm sure that the majority of you here watched Battery Day. There's a lot of skepticism in the field, but if I've learned one thing, it's to never doubt Elon. So they didn't really dive too deep into the process that he described. I think that you know, even if they can commercialize that process to produce the lithium that they need, our step still will make that more efficient, because ultimately it needs to run through an aqueous phase to crystallize the salt into cathode ready material. And we can help further purify that lithium. So when lithium is in clay, there's a million other things in there. You know, you need to figure out how to get that lithium out of clay. And basically he just said, add table salt, the lithium comes out. I don't know the other steps, and it's a question that a lot of people that are in, you know, my niche of lithium extraction are asking questions about. But I guess time will tell what he does.
Yeah, I'm chemist, I'm scientist, and the wording on adding table salt onto clay and get lithium just doesn't make sense too much. So,
all right, so there's, yeah, exactly.
I mean, what you are talking about, the molecular sieve, that's a technology that already exists in getting, for example, nitrogen out of air.
Right.
So when some instrumentation needs nitrogen, you can either make nitrogen by compressing, liquefying air and then making distillation, or you can use the filtration system when you kind of skip all the whole cooling and distillation of liquefied air. So that makes much sense. Yeah.
Yep. There's a few people
are your
in the
customers?
chat.
I
oh, here
see.
somebody's asking
What causes
the loss?
Yeah.
For the old method, such that it only recovers 30%. So basically, the lithium, when you pump the brine from the underground reservoir aquifer, the lithium is only 0.17%. So the total TDS, total dissolved solids or salts, make up about 30% of this brine. I mean, this brine is, it's as salty as the Dead Sea, for instance, even saltier.
Mm-hmm.
And of all of that salt, the majority is chloride and then sodium and then potassium and magnesium, but only a small fraction is lithium. And some of the highest concentrations of lithium, for instance, are 0.17%. That's found in Chile. And it's done on a scale of what's called ppms, parts per million. So I'll say 0.17 is 1,700 ppms. And then, so it goes into the first pond, and the sun evaporates about half of the water, and sodium chloride precipitates. Then they move all the brine to the next pond, and the sun evaporates half of the remaining water, and potassium chloride evaporates. And then it moves to the next pond where magnesium precipitates. But the idea is to concentrate the lithium up from 1,700 ppms up to 60,000, which is where you need it, about 6% lithium, so that you can crystallize it into lithium salt. But when it goes into the magnesium, in order to get up to 6%, lithium starts co-precipitating with magnesium, and it crashes out. And that's where they lose about 50% of the available lithium. But there's nothing they can do about it, because they need to get it up to a high concentrated percentage in order to make it into the lithium salt carbonate or lithium hydroxide that's shipped to the battery cell manufacturers. So natural evaporation is an inexact science, and they lose a lot of lithium along the pond sequence or pond cascade because of that co-precipitation.
So when they have the third step or fourth, when there is co-precipitation of magnesium with lithium, I suppose that they kind of take it on the side and they work on the solution which contains even more lithium, correct?
Sorry, repeat that question.
So so there is 4 crystallizations when they crystallize out first sodium, then potassium, then magnesium, and the next one is co-precipitation,
right,
with magnesium and lithium, and they still don't take it.
No, they don't
They
take
take
it.
the solution, that the brine that remains, and they keep working on it.
Right.
But do they put it somewhere on the side, the co-precipitate magnesium and lithium, because you could technically take it and use it? Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of lithium. That's where the majority of the lithium is lost.
Right.
But it's in these huge piles of salt that's mixed in with magnesium. What you would need to do is you would need to re-dilute it and turn it back into an
Dissolve it in
aqueous
water.
mixture,
Yeah.
and then reprocess that. And that's a problem that's yet to be tackled.
So you need to have a certain minimum concentration of lithium in the brine to push it through the molecular sieve?
To push it through our sieve?
Yes.
No. So that's the difference in what we've created, and other types of membrane filtration, such as nanofiltration or NF. NF had a limit that they could push it through using pressure, like osmotic pressure, of about 10 to 12% TDS. For us, we can treat brines that are up to 30, 35%. And that's why our solution is economically viable, because all of these salts or all these brines have really high TDS. You would need to dilute that brine down to about 12% salt in order to run it through NF.
Cool.
Teague, I have a question. This may be out of scope, but it's something that I find as an EV advocate, I get all the time, is that I'll get a picture of that lithium evaporation pond, and they'll say, and the ICE driver will say, electric vehicles are not environmentally safe. It's just as bad as a gas car, yada, yada, yada. Is there anything you can speak to, either the current state or the future state where your company comes into play, that could help those of us who need to answer those questions to our friends? that mining lithium, yeah, it's not great, but it's X% or X as bad, or 1X as bad as drilling for oil, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. So all those ICE people just they're not making it up, but when you take anything out of the ground, there's obviously a carbon footprint associated, right? But the real key is what happens after it's out of the ground and a usable product. So this is kind of twofold, right? One is, once lithium is in a battery, it's not a one-time use, right? It's like saying that paper straws are the same as plastic straws, or anything that's a one-time use is way worse than something that's reusable for however long a lithium battery lasts for, right? So that's the first thing. And I could actually show you some quick numbers on that in my larger deck. So this is kind of some numbers here, that for every 1 single ton of lithium utilized in batteries, on an annual basis, if it's in vehicles, it replaces 134,000 tons of CO2. And if it's in like a battery that holds electricity overnight, it replaces 55,000 tons. So if you pair those things together and you say that my EV is charged by renewable sources, then you're looking at 190,000 tons of CO2 reduction for every 1 ton of lithium. And 1 ton of lithium is used across about 90 cars or so. So I did the numbers, what it takes to eliminate half a gigaton of CO2, and that's utilizing about 3,700 tons of lithium in electric vehicles. So that's after the lithium is in its reusable batteries, right? In terms of the lithium mining itself, I mean, our solution uses a lot less water than these brines, than these ponds. It has a much smaller footprint. Those are really the two things that we look at. But taking anything out of the ground is going to have some environmental footprint, not only for the environment around it, but what you have to use to get it out of the ground as well. So,
Teague, question for you from a layman who's not a chemist and not a scientist, and I'm just asking, just generally, this entire process of mining lithium is new to me and it's fascinating to hear you talk about it. But and this is, most people may understand this on the call and I don't. If they're extracting sodium and magnesium and potassium in Chile and Bolivia and all those places, are they doing anything with those things as well? Are they actually processing those for salt or whatever else, or is it just the only goal is to do lithium?
Yeah, so sodium chloride is the first thing that comes out, and that's table salt, and
yep,
there's enough of that around, but it's locally sourced, and it's pretty much locally sourced anywhere. The second thing, potassium chloride, is actually used as, it's a product called potash, which is like fertilizer, and that sells for a few $100s a ton. And these ponds were actually started as potash ponds, and that's one of the main products that that SQM used to produce and still does produce. That in Bolivia they produce a lot of potash, and then magnesium chloride can be used as like road salt. I was just on a call earlier today with Compass Minerals out of Utah, and US Mag, and some of these big Great Salt Lake companies that produce road salt and things like that. But yeah, there's a lot of different uses for different types of salt. It's not like they're just wasted trying to get to lithium.
So they're actually using it for, there's multi-purpose along the way. They're taking pieces of it for magnesium chloride maybe and whatever. It's not just the end game, which is lithium. They're using it for other stuff. Okay, thank you.
Right. So somebody just said, I always heard that using the sun to concentrate the brines was a positive. Yeah, I mean, look, there's positives and there's negatives. One is that you need to create this enormous footprint in the ponds to extract it, right? Ultimately, yes, using the sun is a lower power cost than doing it with fossil fuels. With our system, it comes out to about $100 per ton of lithium as a electricity cost. That's using 10 cents a kilowatt hour. But there's other ways to generate electricity with LNG or even solar or solar thermal. It's some of the other negatives about the ponds, such as the water usage, some of the chemicals that they need throughout the ponds. Obviously a huge labor force. I mean, that pond system that I showed you, they have 2,000 people that work those ponds. It's 15 square miles in 1,000-person shifts. So they have 1,000 people come for 2 weeks at a time, 500 people per shift, 2 shifts. And then those 1,000 people get 2 weeks off, and the other 1,000 people come in for 2 weeks at a time. So it's
Wow.
yeah, it's heavy labor. But
Well,
yeah, using the sun, like
maybe
for sure.
it's possible to automate, but the other question is, what's the cost of labor in those areas, right? But I have also another comment. Based on the picture that you shared, it actually looks like the area is not developed. So, working in that field doesn't actually take away any livable area. Am I right?
So to me, I think the same way as you. I mean, this is in the desert in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And what does it matter? Let's just develop the whole salt flat. But there are surrounding ecosystems. They have a lot of like flamingos and stuff. And there actually are like native people that live around there. And those ponds really disrupt the water table below and actually contaminate it as well. So these kind of like native groups of people have huge problems with some of these ponds. Mm-hmm. And
yeah,
there's internal battles about them. But like, yeah, I mean, to me, it's in the middle of the desert.
Mm-hmm. There was a question in the chat. Are there any safety hazards for the workers?
These companies obviously practice extreme safety protocols. However, you are living in the middle of the desert. It's really hot. This is the highest UV index in the entire world. 11 on the UV index. But nothing like they're operating big machinery, like scooping out the salts. But every company needs to practice safety protocols. I don't know what type of hazards you're thinking of.
Maybe Laura had something in mind. I'm just reading.
I guess, thank you. I was thinking more about, are there any hazards related to exposure to toxic substances?
Yeah,
well, probably not, because those are alkali metals, and I mean, if you get exposed to table salt, because that's the highest component of it, that's what I think would be the highest hazard. But I want to also stress out that in that region, there was also a case a few years ago. There was a mine for coal, and the workers were really deep down there, and there was an explosion or something, and they were locked in, and they were really deep underground, and they saved them with a huge undertaking, huge cost, international cost. So the lithium mining is just surface stuff. They don't go underground, right?
Yeah, it's surface. I wouldn't say there's anything harmful to like toxic like that, but these are chemical companies. So that, that needs to be taken into account.
I have a question about growth of the company. What would be like the most prohibiting factor for the good adoption of your methods on a larger scale?
So a lot of these customers that we're working with are really old mine type thinkers. The adoption of new technology has been somewhat of a hurdle, but I think we've gotten past that with our stepped approach. Scaling is obviously always a problem, as you guys know and probably heard in Battery Day. Alon talks a lot about, making one prototype is easy to do. Making 500,000 Cybertrucks is difficult to do. So scaling is always something that I think about a lot. We've partnered with one of the biggest water technology companies in the world, a company called Suez, to manufacture our membranes and some of the ancillary equipment involved with the broader system. But still, even in that case, I think those are our two biggest hurdles towards growth, is customer adoption and really kind of getting them to accept our business model as well, which is taking a technology fee or royalty for every ton of lithium produced. Most of these guys will just want to buy our technology and have that be it. That's not what we're in the game for. We've had several customers try to ask for exclusivity. So there's always that kind of negotiation at the table. But then scaling really is the other big thing.
Excellent.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So do we have any more questions? If not, I would like to thank Teague again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was fantastic. And thank you for,
you guys for having me.
yeah, thank you for coming to our meeting. I invited also people from Texas, because Texas is also the mecca of energy, and Elon Musk is moving there. So
we're moving there too. We're building our labs in Austin, Texas. So
yeah.
My plan is to be right next to him.
Cool. Wonderful.
Yeah. Move. Yes, very good. Yeah, this is Dave from Texas. Thanks so much, Teague. This has been great.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
But your headquarters is in Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah, incorporated corporate tax structure in Puerto Rico. But science and operations will be in Austin, Texas. And we're partnered with the University of Texas. They're our best partner, our closest confidant. So there's really a lot. We have a lot of scientists already in Texas. Yeah.
Great. So we'll go back to our meeting. You are very welcome to stay if you wish.
I got to run, but I appreciate everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. So here is the contact information to Teague. And we'll go to the next agenda on our item, and which is the road trip in an EV. And I have asked few members to share their stories. As you can imagine, most of the road trips are done by people with Teslas, because Tesla has the most advanced infrastructure, charges the fastest of all vehicles. And just to show you, information from internet, on the left side is a charging curve for Tesla Model 3 long range, and on the right side is charging curve for Chevy Bolt. And what I want to highlight is the scaling on the y-axis, right? So here we start around 100 kilowatts, and this is for supercharger V3, right? Not every supercharger is V3 capable. If you have V2, then the curve is kept at 120 kilowatts, and then then it goes slowly down. Here with Bolt, we are kept at about 55 kilowatts. up until about 56%, and then it starts stepping down. So obviously that changes what is the experience of driving a road tripping with a Chevy Bolt, which I did, but it was not true road trip like going to the other coast or to Florida. Yeah, and then of course the experience in the winter when the battery is cold, even though Bolt has thermal management, but it doesn't warm up the battery enough in anticipation of charging, so that the battery can charge at the full 55 kilowatt charging rate. Gentlemen, who would like to start?
I can go first if you like. This is John.
Cool.
How's my sound? Is it loud?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay.
Do you have any slides to share?
Yeah, I do, if you can allow me to share them.
I think you should be able, because I selected that more people can share slides.
Okay. All right, this will be my first time sharing slides on the Zoom session, so I'm not quite sure.
So at the bottom is a green arrow that says share screen.
Yeah.
And then it gives you options out of the windows that you have opened. And the one on top is to share the whole screen, which kind of simplifies the thing.
Actually, I'll just choose the whole screen and then I'll.
And then whatever you do on your computer will be able to see.
Okay, it needs me to grant permission. Let's see. Okay.
We still don't see the share screen.
Yeah. Okay.
Did you press the green button at the bottom?
Yeah, I'm just having. There's a max setting that's.
If you're on a Mac and haven't granted permission before, you may actually have to bounce out of this meeting and come back.
What are you saying, Caleb?
If he's never granted permission before, oftentimes on the Mac, it makes you quit the application and then come back into it.
Are you on Mac?
I am.
Yeah.
Okay. Is anybody expert in Macs? Because I cannot.
Yeah, that's what I just gave the advice. If you do the share screen, it says grant permission.
Yeah.
Follow the help for how to grant permission. But then it may tell you it needs to close the application.
Okay, let me try again.
We see it.
Hey, well done.
So, okay, so it's saying Zoom would like to record this computer screen, grant access, security.
It opens system preferences.
Yeah, we'll do that.
I don't know how you're here. You don't have to. Yeah, you're good. It's there. Just close out. You should be good now. I mean, we're seeing your screen. So.
Oh, you're seeing it, okay.
Yeah, so you can kill that. Command W.
All right, let me find the. Okay, you see that now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Let me just move this out of the way. Okay. So just to let people who don't know me, just to let you know, I've been driving Tesla Model S since March of 2013. During that time, I've owned two different Model S's. From March 2013 to June 2016, I had a Model S 85, and I did a total of 68,652 miles on that. And then since June 2016, I've had a Model S 90D, and so far I've done 132,000 miles on that. And on the right of the screen, I've just summarized most of the trips, probably all but a few short ones that I've done over the last 7 years. And I summarized the number of days each trip I spent on the road, how many miles I covered, where I had tracked it, I had the kilowatt hours used. And part of the reason I do this is I'm in a competition to visit the most superchargers, most tested superchargers. So currently I've visited about 844 different superchargers. 750 of them have been visited on these trips. And I've spent a total of 407 days on the road in the last 6-7 years. And the total miles for these road trips has been 122, almost 123,000 miles. So I've pretty much seen everywhere in the US mainland. Just to mention, the first couple of trips I did on this list, you'll see, it doesn't sound like much nowadays, but the very first long trip I did back at the end of 2013 was a round trip to Boston. But back then, there was only one supercharger between here and Boston. That was in Darien, Connecticut. So it was actually quite a challenge. And I ended up on that trip having to stop and use a level 2 charger in Natick Mall just outside of Boston in order to be able to complete the trip. So that was quite an adventure, just to do that round trip in a day. And then the second one I did, just to mention that since it's here, in early 2014, I did a trip down to Kinston, North Carolina and Brier, Kentucky, which again there were very few superchargers on the East Coast at that point. And getting from North Carolina to Brier, Kentucky involved basically being off the supercharger network and using local chargers. So I'll maybe mention a little more about that in a minute. Just a quick map of, these are all the supercharger locations color-coded by year that I visited. And I actually have an appendix to this presentation. If anybody's interested, I've actually got it broken down by year, which makes it a little easier to understand. But
I think, John, your map would be more clear if you showed those that you did not visit.
True. So onto the tips and trips, planning your trip. Now, bear in mind, all of my EV driving has been in Teslas, so my information is biased towards that. I can't really offer, some of what I say will be relevant, but some of it may be limited to Tesla. But basically, when I'm planning trips, I use a website called supercharge.info, which is both a website that tracks the rollout of superchargers, but you can actually use it for trip planning. And it's actually very convenient, allows you to sketch out a trip, contain the mileage and time estimates for each leg of a trip. So that I usually just plan my trips on that nowadays. I personally usually limit my daily traveling to 400 to 450 miles a day. That's basically driven by or determined by my wife, because she won't sit in the car for much more than that. And very occasionally we'll do 500 or just over 500 if it's absolutely necessary in order to, let's say, reach somewhere that we're trying to get to or whatever. My experience is to recommend breaking the day down into 2 to 2.5 hour segments, so which really means 100 to 150 mile segments between charges, just because, as I'll mention in a minute, that's more efficient in terms of charging speed, and it's more relaxing in terms of driving, taking a break, and stretching your legs and so on. I save my itinerary in a spreadsheet. Nowadays I use Google Sheets, where from the supercharge.info, I copy over the distance and time estimates, and I usually have a printed copy of that on my trips, and I also can access it on my smartphone. When I plan out the routes that we're going to take, but then my wife plans the hotel stays and also food options at stops. And I think if you're doing long trips, that's an important thing, is to try and make sure there are decent places to eat at the places you stop. I recommend, if possible, choosing hotels with some kind of charging option, because that can save a lot of time. If you can get a full charge overnight, that can save you, even using the supercharger network, that can save you an hour and up to an hour and a half, if you can start off with a full charge. You can use PlugShare to locate hotels that have charging options. And Tesla also has if you go to tesla.com and use the parameter find us, it will, you can get a display of all the Tesla destination chargers. I also recommend using PlugShare to see if there's any reported issue with chargers if you're going for non-Tesla chargers or chargers at hotels, especially if you're going off the beaten track and you're going to be very dependent on the charger. It's good to see if other people have used it recently, if they've had any issues and so on. And I won't go into it now, but I have a couple of stories relating to that from the Kentucky trip and also from a trip to Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. This is just a screenshot of supercharge.info. So that's what it looks like. All the red dots are the currently active live superchargers. The orange cones are the ones under construction, and the blue dots are the ones that have permits but are not currently in construction yet. So as you can see, or as you probably know, if you're a Tesla driver, the eastern part of the US and California and the Pacific Northwest are pretty much saturated. And you can pretty much nowadays go anywhere you want to in the US on the supercharger network.
So you said you've been to like 840. How many total? What percentage of them have you been to?
Right now in because of the last year, I haven't done very much traveling. I've actually fallen behind. There's now, I don't have the number off the top of my head. There's probably like 150, about 150 or maybe a little more that I have not visited yet.
I think you are essentially catching up the game, right? Because there is a certain rate of visiting superchargers versus they build new. So
yeah, it's a never-ending task. I was managing to stay pretty much on top of it up until early last year, and then with the inability to do any substantially long trips, I've fallen behind. But then so have most other people. There are a few people who've managed to still do some trips, but to me, it's been too risky to do that. This is just a screenshot to illustrate how using Supercharge info and what you get. So basically, you can click on one of those red dots, and I think if I go to the next screen, yeah, you'll get a pop-up when you click on one of the active superchargers, and one of the options you'll see there is to add it to your route. So if you do that, you can basically, let me see how, I'm not sure where the navigation, well, it doesn't matter. Just want to try and get back to the previous screen, but so on the left, as you add stops, they'll be listed there. It shows you a running total of the miles for the trip and the estimated duration. And then for each leg of the trip, it gives you the individual distance and time breakdown. And if you want it, the actual directions, although I never bother with the directions because obviously the Tesla has built-in navigation and so on. Okay, and just a screenshot with PlugShare just to show how this is actually in this place called Susanville, California, where I was investigating the feasibility of going from Klamath Falls in Oregon to Reno without hitting any superchargers. And it's a fairly long stretch. So I was looking to see what level 2 chargers are available on the way. And there's in this place called Susanville has a, oops. Okay, Susanville has a couple of level 2 chargers in particular. There's one that's well known to EV people who've done this route. There's a Red Line Inn and Suites, which has a couple, has one Tesla charger, which is open to the public, a Tesla destination charger. So on PlugShare, you can get the details about the charger, and you'll get comments if people have used it. And that's, as I said, very helpful. Oops. And another thing for planning your trip, if you're a non-Tesla user or if the range is going to be tight, I'd recommend using trip planning software like, there's something called EV Trip Planner, which at this point is a little bit out of date, but it's a very straightforward to use interface, and it still works well for my Tesla. It may not work so well for newer Teslas. And then the more recent one is a Better Route Planner, which a lot of people like. I personally find it a little more complicated to use. Then there's Electrify America, which has a website where you can see the Electrify America chargers, which now I think, if I remember correctly, they've got up to about 500 locations. So they're quite significant if you're non-Tesla. And even if you're a Tesla user, there may be times when having access to Electrify America charger could be useful. Finally, if you're going to travel in Canada, there's something called the eCharger network, which the Canadian utilities generally belong to. I'm familiar with that mainly for Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, where I've used that to help plan trips in Canada before the superchargers were built out there. This is just a screenshot of EV Trip Planner, just to give you a sense of what it is. And this is a screenshot of a Better Route Planner. And then second part of planning your trip, just some thoughts I have based on my experience. Are you carrying a spare tire? A lot of EVs don't come with a spare tire. Teslas certainly don't. I never used to worry about that, but then I had the experience on one trip of getting a flat tire in the middle of nowhere in Montana and having quite a hassle to get the tire repaired. So I now carry a spare tire and I carry a tire repair kit. Definitely carry a tire inflator if you need to be able to deal with problems with your tires. Pressure gauge and snow chains with a question mark. If you're going to do any winter driving, there are roads in the West where you are required to have snow chains if there is any snow forecast. Making sure you have washer fluid, Windex, and paper towel roll. If you're doing long trips, especially in the South, you'll find that your windscreen and whole car can get covered with bugs. So you really need to be able to clean your windscreen pretty regularly. I also have come across people that actually take whole cleaning kits so that when they're stuck at a supercharger for a long time, they actually wash their car or clean their car. That's a bit overkill for me, but some people do that. And then make sure you have adapters for the various charging plugs. The Tesla Model S comes with a set of adapters. I'm not sure if the Model 3 comes with all of the same ones. And I don't do this so often, but I used to travel also with my charging cable, because there have been times when you actually, you wanted to connect to a charger, like if somebody has a NEMA 1450 outlet when you're on a trip, you could use that if you have a cable with you, but if you don't have a cable with you, you'll be out of luck. So I have taken my charging cable, especially if I think I'm going to be in areas that charging might be difficult. I also have a CHAdeMO adapter, which is, I'd highly recommend if you're going to certain areas of Canada, specifically Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. While there are now some superchargers there, they don't cover the whole of the provinces. So having a CHAdeMO will let you use the Energy New Brunswick and the Energy Nova Scotia chargers. Make sure you have your charging network cards and apps on your smartphone if the network needs an app. Just suggest taking a cooler because we found that very useful. Take a supply of seltzer if you like drinking seltzer, because once you leave the East Coast, you will have a hard time finding it. And take snack supplies rather, because there are times when you can't find anywhere good for lunch, and just being able to have snacks and keep going is often useful. For the actual driving, as I said before, I suggest breaking the driving into 2 to 3 hour legs. Makes the trip more relaxing, optimizes the charging speed. My experience is the ideal charging range is between about 10% charge and 60% charge, which for my Model S is between 27 and 160 miles. So what that means is the optimum leg that you should be driving is about 130 miles. And I generally like to have a buffer of about 40 to 60 miles, depending on the length of the leg. When I'm charging, trying to optimize the charging, I'll usually continue.
Hey, Will.
Yep.
Oh. You're still on the phone.
I usually, when I'm charging, I'll continue a trip once I have a 10% buffer. My experience is that if you start with a 10% buffer, unless there are exceptional driving conditions, once you get going, that will usually increase to about 15%, and I usually feel comfortable with that. If it drops below 10% on the leg of a trip, then I know I need to slow down and be a little more careful about driving. And I usually keep mental track of how many miles of buffer I have left. And just remember to allow more of a buffer in cold or windy weather, or if you know there's substantial altitude gains. And I suggest trying to plan your day so that the lunch break is at a supercharger so you can get a full charge while you're eating. And likewise for dinner, if you're not staying at a hotel. If you're not staying at a hotel that has charging. And just some other thoughts on optimizing your range. Sometimes you're on legs that are pushing the upper limit of what your range is. And if you're in windy or rainy weather, that can reduce your range further. That's a particular problem in Texas and Wyoming and some of the plains states. If you're driving from east to west, very often you're driving into strong winds. So that can really knock your range down. And the simplest way to increase your range is to slow down. A lot of people seem to forget that, but that has a dramatic effect on improving your range. You can draft trucks. I've done that on a few occasions when my range was very tight, and even sitting a few car lengths back can have quite a positive impact. And it also encourages you to drive slower because you're kind of stuck at the truck speed. If you have a Tesla with traffic aware cruise control, then you can do that relatively safely because you can just set a following distance and rely on the traffic aware cruise control to slow you down or stop you if the truck comes to any kind of sudden stop. There is the danger of being struck by road debris thrown up by the truck. And occasionally you'll find truckers that get annoyed if you draft behind them, and they will deliberately veer over onto the shoulder to throw up debris to basically tell you to back off. If you're in a leg of a trip that has a tight range, make sure you have a backup charging plan. So make sure you know where there might be some level 2 chargers that you can use if you find you need to, and they give you a boost to reach your destination. And generally I suggest that you, on a segment that's going to be tight on range, you should start off slower, and then if your buffer increases, you can always speed up later. But that's generally a wise thing to do. And then I guess that's basically it. I include a couple of appendices so I can make a link to this available if anybody wants it, basically with some resources. Just those are straightforward.
This is fantastic, and I think if you can share it with us, we would like to post it on our website.
Yeah, by all means. Yeah, I've got some links. Oh, I did want to mention, particularly as regards Tesla owners, I use a utility called Teslafy, which communicates directly with the Tesla and keeps track of everything you do in the car. If you don't have that or haven't heard of it, I highly recommend using that. I have a couple of screenshots that just show you what it does, but basically it keeps track of everything you do. So if you're doing trips, what I used to have to do was, I had my printed copy of a spreadsheet, and I had to manually write down all the parameters as I went along. Nowadays, Teslafy just keeps track of it all for me, so I can get trip reports basically from the software. So I really recommend that. And then, this is just a screenshot of it tracking a trip that I did at some point where I went down to Florida and drove across the country. And this is another screenshot just to show you the kind of information you can get on a daily trip. So it'll show you the miles driven.
You are a data scientist.
Yeah, yeah. It gives you all the information about the temperature, your speed, everything else. So it's really useful. And that's it. The other slides are just I did some year-by-year maps of the superchargers I visited, so I won't bother with those right now. So that's pretty much all I have, I think.
Thank you so much, John. That was very, very insightful, very inspiring, because you visited so many places, charged at so many superchargers. I don't think I could do something like that with my Bolt. I mean, sure I could, because if Ken, what's his name? The guy who did it with the Nissan Leaf, the first generation. So he could do it. I can do it.
Sal, you thinking of Sal?
No, but his friend.
Oh, okay. I know Sal used to do trips in his Leaf that always impressed me. I mean, just in a Leaf doing a trip down to Baltimore is quite a challenge, it seems to me.
Anyway, Steve, do you want to take over? I think if you now, John, can stop sharing your slides.
Okay.
So that somebody else can start sharing.
Did that do it?
No.
No. Stop there.
Yes. Okay. Do we have Steve here? Yeah.
Okay.
let me see if I can share. I have a really bad internet connection. Let's see if I get
Are
lucky.
you in Louisiana now or in New Jersey?
I'm in New Jersey.
New Jersey.
I'm in a B&B
Bed and breakfast.
that
Okay.
has a.
I thought you are with Tom Malogany in his garage, right? I recognize the charging stations. Am I right? Oh, did you get cut off? Yeah, I don't see Steve at this moment. Do we have Jason Kaplan? Oh, wait a second. I just let him in.
I'm here.
I just, let's see whether Steve can reconnect. You are muted, so unmute. Okay.
Yes, I'm back.
Okay.
Okay. So let's see here.
Good. We can see it.
I didn't do anything nearly as fancy. When I had a Chevy Volt, which really was my wife's car. I switched from a diesel where I'd fill the car up like every month or so, and 600 miles between fill-ups was no big deal. Switching to a Chevy Bolt was a little different. Now, I don't know if you can hear me well. I've got a really
bad, yes.
It's a real bad internet connection here. So anywho, I went to a Chevy Bolt. I got it Halloween of 2017, and almost immediately, like within less than a week, had to go to a funeral at Arlington National Cemetery. Here's a picture of the car, front wheel drive, 238 miles of range officially, 5-passenger hatchback, and DC fast was what was the non-Tesla industry standard at the time, 55 kilowatts. The DC fast chargers on the market when the Bolt was developed were 55 kilowatts. Now that is laughingly slow, to put it politely. Yes. My first road trip was to Arlington National Cemetery, and hopefully getting back, I left the house with a completely full charge. And as you can see here, the guessometer had said my maximum range was 247. My likely range was 210, and worst case was 172. And, it was raining, the temps were in the upper 30s, DC traffic and New Jersey Turnpike traffic. It was loosely a 550-mile round trip. I was going to leave. I was going to finish up at a funeral home in Springfield, Virginia, and come back to Maplewood well after dark. And as of course, it was going to be both rain and intermittent snow. And this is kind of the trip from New Jersey up here all the way down to Washington, and then loop back. Now, in those days, this is only a couple of years ago. This was November of 2017. There weren't CCS chargers, very many CCS chargers. I drove to the Delaware Welcome, misspelled Delaware too. I drove to the Delaware Welcome Center, where they had a whole bucket load of Tesla chargers and 2 level 2 chargers that had been installed by University of Delaware for a test. The main reason I stopped was because I'd been drinking coffee all morning and I'm an old geezer. So I used the bathroom, used the level 2 charger, picked up like 15 minutes of charge. I then drove to Maryland House, I had seen that they had just installed, the Maryland Department of Transportation had just installed DC fast chargers at Chesapeake House and Maryland House. They weren't officially open, but they were there and they were free for the first 6 months. I was probably one of the first people to use them. I stopped at Maryland House. I was there about 30 minutes, mostly to make sure I had enough charge to get down to Arlington National Cemetery and Fort Myers, and then the reception at the funeral home in Springfield, Virginia, and then get back to Chesapeake House. And I stopped at Chesapeake House on the way back because it was the northernmost DC fast charger that I knew of that was within 5 miles of the route, either side of the route. I sat there until the car was 100% charged. I preconditioned it. I turned on the interior heat to warm everything up. The downside to being at Chesapeake House was they were closed. And I wanted coffee. I'm a coffee fiend. So I drove back to Wilmington to the Delaware rest area, got coffee, picked up a little bit of a charge, and then went back up to New Jersey. The leg from Wilmington to New Jersey, I was doing probably like, 55, 60 miles an hour. I had temperature set at 68. I had the seat heaters on. I had the steering wheel heater on. And, I was getting passed by kids on skateboards. And I made it back to New Jersey. I think the guessometer said that I had about 30 miles left when I got back. Now, if you look at PlugShare today, these are the CCS chargers on that route. Anybody can do it. These are a mixture of EVgo, Electrify America, ChargePoint. That same trip today would be a no-brainer for somebody in a Bolt. That first trip was kind of an eye-opener. It took a whole lot longer than I expected. It was, like I said, around 550 miles round trip. It took significantly, I would have done the whole thing in one tank of gas in my diesel, in my VW Jetta. I would have filled up in Maplewood and driven back to Maplewood and filled up again. Instead, I stopped a lot. I sat around waiting for the car to warm up, charge up. It was interesting. I'd hoped at one point to be able to plug into a wall outlet at the funeral home where the reception was being held, but they were repaving their parking lot and I couldn't get within 200 feet of an outlet. And even I don't carry a 200-foot power cable around with me. My next trip was about 3 weeks later. I had to go visit my aunt for her 90th birthday in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And it was another one of those trips where, it was, I think, December 13th or something like that. It was first week or two of December. It was cold, it was rainy, it was nasty. And there were two DC fast chargers on the route between Maplewood and Carlisle. One was in Bridgewater, New Jersey at a car dealer, which was 15 miles from my house. I didn't see a whole lot of point in stopping there. There were no level 2 chargers listed until you get over to Carlisle. And that was at a bed and breakfast that was in use. I did find out as I stopped in Allentown planning to use the bathroom, the Whole Foods had a level 2 charger in Allentown. And so I suddenly decided, I need lunch, and stopped there and had a fairly long lunch at the Whole Food and picked up about 25, 30 miles of range. And I got to Carlisle with 25 miles of range to spare. So lunch turned out to be a really good idea. After we did my aunt's 90th birthday party, I went back to, let's see, after we did my aunt's 90th birthday party, there was a brand new, just opened Electrify America at the Sheets, just on the outskirts of Carlisle. I think it had been open about a week and a half. The guy inside the Sheets said I was the first person he had seen use it. It was 9 o'clock at night. It was a mixture of rain and snow. And Electrify America's original chargers were, to put it politely, suboptimal. If you pulled directly up to the charger, the cable would not reach the plug-in port on my Bolt. I ended up parking sideways, taking up 3 parking spots so the cable would reach the car. Luckily, nobody else needed to use it. There wasn't anybody else there. I spent over an hour, got the car back to 100%, got the car heated up and everything, and headed back to Maplewood. It was clear that I was not going to make it, so I stopped in Allentown again. Whole Foods was closed, and when they close, they turn off the power to their chargers, because the whole point of the charger is to attract people, to get them to spend money in the store. So I knew about PlugShare, and I went on PlugShare, and I found a car dealer. I don't remember the dealer's name. They had a 16 amp level 2 charger tucked around the back of the dealership. And I pulled over there and plugged in. And I mean, basically took a nap. The car picked up 25 miles. The police came by to find out what I was doing there. That was fun. I picked up about 25 miles of range and left there for Maplewood. And the guessometer said that I had 21 miles of range left when I pulled into Maplewood. The last leg from Allentown to Maplewood, again, I was doing about 60 miles an hour. Cabin heat was in the low 60s. I had the steering wheel heater on. I had the seat heaters on. Anybody who's driven I-78 through that stretch knows that everybody's doing 75 or 80. I mean, you're in trouble when people in rowboats are passing you. It was not a fun time. You go do it today on PlugShare, and you go look today, and you can do it without breaking a sweat. Again, it's the differences in the last couple of years from December of 2017 to this picture was taken this afternoon. It is just amazing. It's an easy drive. Of course, the Chevy Bolt still has its lousy charge rate, but it works. My next long road trip was being one for punishment. It's a good thing by this point I was separated, because if my wife had been with me on this trip, she wouldn't have been my wife anymore. That was she already wasn't, so she didn't have to deal with it. Drove to Carolina Beach. In my diesel, the only stop I would have made would have been about halfway to use the bathroom. The diesel got, it's loosely a 610-mile trip door to door from my place to where I stay in Carolina Beach. And the low fuel light would come on as I passed the assisted living place my father lived in the south of Wilmington. The Bolt, we can safely say, took a little bit longer. I stopped at the Wawa in Newcastle for 45 minutes to put a charge on. Stopped at Maryland House again, the second red dot, to put another charge on. I stopped in Richmond at Electrify America charger. PlugShare has that as the last reliable DC fast charger between, if you're headed from New Jersey down to Wilmington, North Carolina. At the time, PlugShare had that as the charger. It was a brand new Electrify America charger. PlugShare had that listed as a 9. The other DC fast chargers south of there were listed as 1s and 2s, which typically means they're not very good. I charged up at Richmond, and then I drove to the Hilton Garden Inn. I had timed my trip so it would be fairly late when I got to the Hilton Garden Inn in Roanoke Rapids. The convention bureau for that county, it's just over the border in North Carolina. The convention bureau has level 2 chargers everywhere, just you name it. They're in front of everything. They're in front of the Applebee's, they're in front of the Cracker Barrel, they're in front of the strip malls, they're at most of the hotels, and they're all free. And so I stopped at the Hilton Garden Inn in Roanoke Rapids and spent the night. You know, it was late when I got there. I got a full charge. And then drove to Wilson, North Carolina, which is the star south of the blue dot. Wilson has a bunch of free level 2 chargers, and I didn't eat breakfast at Roanoke Rapids. I ate breakfast in Wilson, and a very long leisurely breakfast because I needed to make sure the car had a full charge. It was going to be right at the edge of the range from Roanoke Rapids down to Wilmington. I wanted to make sure that I was going to make it. So I stopped in Wilson, had a nice breakfast. There's some new art galleries there. I wandered around town for a while, got the car charged up. There is a DC fast charger, a single DC fast charger on that route in Wallace, North Carolina on Interstate 40. It's right next to probably 12 Tesla superchargers. Like all charge point chargers, they're independently owned. This one is owned by a local electric cooperative, and it had a PlugShare rating of around, I think, 3. When I got there, it was deader than a doornail. I called ChargePoint, and they said, yeah, it had been dead for several days, and they'd called the power company that owns it. And the power company had said they'll get to it eventually. I didn't need a charge, but it would have been nice to top up a little bit. I drove to Wilmington to my brother's place. His wife was a bit surprised to come home and find out that my car was in the driveway where she planned to park. And I had unplugged their electric dryer, even though it was in the middle of a load of laundry, plugged in my car and gave them a king cake because it was right before Mardi Gras, and annoyed them for an hour, drank some of their beers, put about 25 miles of range on the car. And then I drove to Carolina Beach, where there are also no electric chargers. I spent a week in Carolina Beach, plugged into a 110 outlet. If you do that trip today, you know, it's not a big deal. You can find plenty of places to charge. The only thing I would say about this trip here is most of those chargers are Electrify America chargers. When I moved from New Jersey to New Orleans, which is this slide, it was Labor Day weekend, and Electrify America turned off all their chargers from Richmond to Savannah. That huge section of I-95 had no functional CCS chargers. And I was charging in Rocky Mount and saw an Audi e-tron plugged in behind the Doubletree Hotel across the parking lot, and hadn't seen many e-trons in the wild. So I went over to talk to the guy, and he had New Jersey plates on the car and his wife and 2 kids. And to say they were testy would be an understatement. They did not know about PlugShare. They did not know about any other places to charge. The Audi dealer he had leased his car from in New Jersey did not tell him about anything other than Electrify America. And he was dead.
Mm.
He was hitting-
I just want to make a comment. I think that at that point you were already driving your Tesla Model 3. Am
Yeah,
I
by
right?
then I was driving my Model 3. I had switched to a Model 3. This guy was, to put it politely, really upset. And so I sat there and I gave him a lesson on how to use PlugShare, and I showed him some other level 2 and level DC fast chargers that they weren't anywhere near us, but they were close enough with the charge he had picked up. He'd been sitting there behind, he said he'd been sitting behind the DoubleTree for 3 hours, trying to get a charge to get up north of Richmond to where he talked to Electrify America people and tech support, and they had never told him about other places to go charge. They had told him the next Electrify America charger, they had told him the next DC fast charger was north of Richmond. They did not tell him about any of the other DC fast chargers that, although not directly on his route, were within striking distance. He had not been told about the $7,500 federal tax credit. His dealer had not told him about the $5,000 state rebate. He was
Well, that would not apply for him because the vehicle is more expensive than 55,000.
yeah, whatever. He was pretty testy. He was testy out a lot. The kids were taking it mostly in stride. I think his wife was probably going to kill him soon. And he kept looking longingly at the row of Tesla superchargers on the other side of the parking lot and asking why he couldn't use them. I mean, this was a pretty roundabout route to get to New Orleans because I wanted to stop and visit relatives and spend time in Pensacola Beach and stuff. And this with the Tesla, I mean, I visited my daughter in Barnegat. I went down to Arlington National Cemetery to leave flowers on all my relatives' graves. I then drove down to Wilmington, and all the hassles that I had had in my Bolt with the Tesla Model 3 were really no big deal. Now that same route, assuming Electrify America keeps their stuff up and running, it's a fairly easy trip for anybody using CCS, depending on your charging profile. Like you were showing with your slide earlier, the charging profile for the Bolt is suboptimal. Even the new one they announced the other day, it uses an almost identical charging profile.
Yeah. How many more slides do you have?
Yeah, I got a bunch, but they're all basically the same thing. There's nothing.
We need to move on a little bit.
Yeah, that was it pretty much. So.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience. Yeah. I wanted to purposefully pick experience of someone who drives Tesla versus someone who drives non-Tesla. And it's hard to find someone who has experienced road tripping and it's not hippie, right?
Yeah.
And so, Jason, I'm sorry, maybe we can take you some another time, but we need to move on.
Sorry, Jason.
And
that's right. I don't really have anything that you guys can cover.
So let me share.
Yeah, I also am a really big fan of a better route planner, both with the Bolt and with my Tesla. I really like using that. I find that to be a lot more useful. And I also, when I'm on a road trip, I cannot live without PlugShare. I just have to have the two of those programs.
This is must-have tool. Absolutely agree. Yeah. So, I mean, this is just my slide from, this is last year experience. Actually, the picture on the top left is December 2019, Electrify America. And just like what Steve said, the first charger, tried this one, didn't work. Then the second, the third was the last one, because I thought maybe if I go from the other end, it helps. No, it didn't. So I went to the position where you see me, and this is where I finally charged. It told me the moment I plugged it in, it billed me $1, and it told me 89 minutes to 80% from 12. So I stayed for 30 minutes, paid $12, and that was just enough to get back home. So this was for me the last stretch. Bottom left is Harley Davidson in Providence in Rhode Island. And the bottom right is Nissan of New Rochelle in New York. It was so blocked. I could still, make it, but then I was blocking something else. So anyway, we had annual Electric Auto members meeting on February 18th. It's only for paying members. You can see 134 people attended. It was wonderful. So many things. I cannot go into details for many reasons. A week later was chapter leadership meeting. It was very nice, very useful. And I recommend whoever is interested to learn a little bit more about leadership for Electric Auto just to attend, particularly if you plan to open chapter or something, So one thing that I want to shout out that because every chapter has meetings and now virtual, right? Well, not now, but you know what I mean. We want to cross fertilize and allow other chapters to get access to the calendars of all other chapters, so that if there is invited speaker that has something interesting, that you don't have to be bound to your chapter, but you can as well visit another chapter. And just for information, Teague Egan, he was presenting to San Diego Electric Vehicle Association last month. I just picked him up because I thought it's interesting. But then, it was not really fair to the speaker to invite him 2 times for the same organization, just because, before was audience for California, now it's from New Jersey. And this is a screenshot of what is in that calendar. As you can see, our meeting has been posted like that. There is something else. I don't know what is. Oh, T is Try It EVA. And I think this guy, he's from Carolinas or something like that. And so on and so on forth. Chapter finances. So there is a treasurer. The outgoing treasurer is Terry Kirsch, and the incoming is Michael Peters. To contact them, here's the email address, treasurer@electricauto.org. Now, why am I saying it? Because we have opportunity to get reimbursement. So you will go to forms and stuff. But before, I want to show you what is accounting and financial. You need to be paying member to get access to it. You log into electricauto.org, you hit the resources, monthly chapter finances, and accounting financial, right? So our chapter, we have $368. And so if you have some expenses for reimbursement, you can get it from the website. And now there is a new form. So I know that probably nobody was asking for, because I would have to know it. Essentially, if you have some approvable expenses, you just need to have it signed by me, and then you can file online, and they'll send you a check. And I know that Caleb had some expenses with the website. So, it's up to you. Yeah, so Electric Auto has 501c3 status, which means that every chapter that many chapters are very active in legislative matters, right? If you have any questions regarding the political topic, you can ask President April Bolduc. And because of the position of the organization, we cannot be involved in any political campaign. We cannot endorse or supporting candidates in any manner. We can have a conversation with the politician, but we want to make sure that all candidates are invited for when some elections is coming up. And we are allowed to give testimony on bills or legislation. We are actually encouraged. And last but not least, both the membership dues and donations are tax deductible. So let me check the chat because it's flashing at me. Okay, it's related to the previous conversation. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so I wish that we have Kathy on call here. Kathy is our event coordinator, and we already start preparing for Drive Electric Earth Day. You don't need to necessarily get approval from me or from Alex. If you have some event and you feel strong that you want to lead, you can just go ahead to the website driveelectricearthday.org and register it. You will become captain, and they provide all sorts of training and resources for you to get the event done. Obviously, we are still in the middle of pandemic, but we can have both in person and virtual events. I don't know, nobody knows what will be the pandemic numbers in April. Of course, we still will have all these rules in place in April. We are not Texas. That's just a little rant. So for your information, so we have liability insurance, but unlike before, I was saying that we always have to get the certificate of insurance. No, we don't have to. We are automatically covered. But remember that this is only the basic insurance, trip and fall. No cars are insured. The reason why you want to have certificate of insurance if the co-host is asking for it, right? So in that case, you want to contact Julie Chamrat. This is her email address, jchamrat. And this is the company where Electric Auto has already contract. This is one of the benefits that we as a chapter have. And give them enough time, like 2 weeks, and they will give any certificate that we need. And when the certificate is already issued, and you want to add somebody else, they can add somebody else. It's not a big deal. Right. So this is kind of, you know, a picture that I just picked up from New York Times today. These are the numbers where we have, speaking of COVID. Now, so this is one of the emails that I just received from Plug-in America regarding Drive Electric Earth Day. Again, you know, they really want people to start populating the list. If we add event either online or in person by March 19th, whoever will make that registration will be added for chance to win EV charging station, as if we don't already have them, right? If you win, you can use the charging station in your home, give it to a friend, or even give it away to an attendee at your DEED event. Right. Submit a request for EV event materials, safe in person. Okay. The request. Yeah. So there are lots of materials on that website. Link to this deck, I will make it available later. Webinar recordings. So there were already some trainings, and these are available. Maybe I can just, what happens if I hit it? Can you see the page that opened?
Yes.
Okay, so this was 2021. I participated in this one, and then there is also another one. And you can see video, you can see slides, lots of stuff. So I'll go back to this presentation. So here's a list of our prospective events. Now, we don't have any date set in stone, but we have something planned for Milltown. They have cleanup in April. So apparently we can use the time to display vehicles. We are working with Leanne from RideWise. They are so much interested in having something virtual or in person, and they are our helpers. They don't have specific you know, event that they would have. We just want to find somebody else. One of the options is Raritan Valley Community College. We just started communication yesterday, because that organization is very good with electric vehicles. They were among the first in New Jersey to install charging stations on their campus. And as a matter of fact, now they installed a new one because the first generation didn't last this long. So they're on second generation level 2 chargers. Then we have also EV native learning module from the National Electric Auto Association. The goal of that module is to entice the young generation. The terminology EV native means that it's a young person who will very likely, when they grow up, buy electric car as the first car in their life, and will most likely be electric for the rest of the life, because as we have more electrification, so the young generation may never drive the gas car again. So for this module, it was originally co-presented with Russell Corbin, among those leaders in national EAA. And he bought, I think, Kia Niro EV, or wasn't it Kia Soul Electric? And so he would co-present, and it's a motivational speak for high school kids, for example. So I have one candidate from my former colleague. I just need his confirmation that he will do it. He's 18 years old and he drives Model 3, you know, long range. So, and he loves it. This is great. But I want to keep my fingers crossed. And if you know of somebody who has a kid who is excited about electric vehicles, and he's talkative, you know, we want to have someone who is not afraid to talk, and has exposure to electric vehicles through their parents, right? We assume are all parents here. Then let me know, because these kids are our candidates. They don't have to own electric car yet, but they need to be excited to the point that they would say, hey, you know, I love electric vehicles because I have experienced my parents have them, and my first electric car will be electric, and you should have that too, you know, something along those lines. Kathy is also in touch with Duke Farms. We did have virtual event in the fall 2020. So I just put, you know, the 102 is meant to be EV 102. Whatever you can imagine, could it be just something else versus what we already said before? Another could be what I did a year ago in April, you know, take the flag, attach it to a wheel and take a picture and post it on social media. This year I would do it differently. As opposed to asking people to come to me, I would ask who is interested. I would take my car, the flag, I would drive around, attach flag, take a picture, post it, and go to the next one. And since we have 3 flags, what we could do, 3 people could be owning having the flag, or actually North Jersey can, right? So that's 4 flags. And we could just make a contest. Hey, you know, who has more pictures with the flag attached to the wheel? Not attached, but you know what I mean. And NRG is interested in sponsorship. You know, it's his first company that, you know, is bugging me and saying, hey, you know, if you do something, we'll give you money, you know, and we need money for meetup membership. That's something that is costing us about $100 for every 6 months. Guys, have you seen this video, gastral video infographic? That it's freshly released yesterday. It was produced by Mark Linthicum, and it's narrated by Robert Llewellyn. I wish that I could show it, but we don't have enough time. I think it's like a 14 minutes. It's a wonderful infographic. And the voiceover by Robert Llewellyn just makes it so entertaining. Essentially, it's about, it shows in numbers what it takes to manufacture gasoline, because we always hear from the naysayers that there is a carbon footprint and pollution associated with the electric car because the energy is produced by the power plants, right? But of course, as we know, there is also the whole slew of machinery and industry that manufactures gas, which starts with extraction, processing, transport, and again transport, and then we burn it at only up to 30% efficiency. So I wish I could hit the link, but I will not do it because we don't have enough time. Oh, come on. I want to hit next slide. Okay, webinars. What do we got? Okay, I want to make big shout out to our visitors today from Houston. As you've heard, Dave Hansen, he's president of Houston Electric Auto Association. They have meetings every first Thursday in a month. Last month, they had a technical guy from Aptera, the 3-wheeler company that used to exist in 2012, then they bankrupt, and now they are revived. And they have very interesting product coming up this year. It's 3-wheeler. It kind of looks like the first generation, but it's much more efficient because there is so much more development since those last 10 years, essentially. All meetings are being recorded. You go to the website. So I actually quite encourage you to visit the website and see the recording from Aptera. I just, you know, I'm kind of 80% sure that I'll buy that vehicle, you know. And so, yes, it means that tomorrow they have a meeting. The topic is about incentives in Texas to buy electric vehicles.
Right, and actually I can tell you,
yes,
Stan, if you do actually get an Aptera or want to put a reservation in, let somebody know and get a referral code because you can get a discount on the deposit.
Good to know. Good to know. So it would go through the website or through somebody like you?
You can check with me and I can get you somebody with a referral code.
Good.
Yeah. And then you use that as a starting point, kind of like with Tesla, you use it as a starting point and get that. But yeah, that was really good on Aptera. And then tomorrow evening, everyone's invited to come and hear the first half of the meeting. We'll have the speaker talking about incentives. And then the second half, we'll be talking about charging and just all kinds of topics. As folks may know, we recently had some extended power outages here. And I had one of my members reach out to me and said, during the second half, can I find out about putting batteries at my house? So not directly car related, but as we all know, the batteries are a major part of our EVs and they're very applicable to keeping the lights on at your house. So
Yeah.
that'll be,
Yeah, every time there is a event like that, then somebody will quickly come up with a webinar on how to hook up electric car to back power your home. We did have lots of power outage in July last year, and we immediately generated a webinar when we wanted to show people how to do it. It is good for emergency. Only because you don't want to stress out the onboard electronics too much, but it makes a big difference because you want to be able to have a phone, charging phone, router on, and a refrigerator in first place, and lights. So and that can be all powered from your car. Okay, move on.
actually, I
Sustainable.
can say that my son and I got in our electric car because it was getting towards bedtime. The power had been off for 18 hours and it was much more efficient to just heat the seats and the inside of the car, and it would hardly take anything out. The car was pretty much fully charged.
Correct.
The house was down to 52 degrees and we weren't sure what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So we were already in our EV.
So last time I was reporting that NJBPU approved for PSCNG to invest 80 million and another million in charging infrastructure, residential, commercial, and everything in between, and municipal, I assume, as well. So this guy, Todd Ranika, that name actually sounds kind of Czech. Needless to say, this guy, he's from PSCNG, and he's going to talk about the details, I assume, about what PSCNG is going to do. How are they going to install, invest into charging infrastructure? So I think, this will be interesting. I'm registered. I suggest everyone to register. And by the way, NJBPU approved other utilities for that investment. The Atlantic County utility company has been approved, and apparently the other will be approved shortly if they have not been already approved, because New Jersey wants to be covered as a whole. So that will be next Tuesday. First webinars, this is kind of cheesy slide because I got it last month. The next presentation, fourth webinar, is electric plane. That is interesting. I want to see that one. Sale, okay, whatever. Next meeting, we will have Tom Malagany. Tom Malagany, I already spoke with him. He's doing lots of car reviews, and this year we have lots of new models coming in, and he's very good at covering that. So he will be our next speaker, April 7th. New models overview. As always, if you have idea of speaker, please let me know. As always, if you have idea about EV show or virtual or something that helps to promote electric vehicles and you don't feel comfortable, let me know, or Alex or Kathy, and we'll be happy to take it from that. Questions? Let me check the chat. The dirty truth about combustion. Yes, okay, so somebody put the link here. Thank you, Stephen, correct. Kathy, you are here.
Yes, Dan, I'm here. Sorry.
Did you come later?
No, I was just maybe about 4 or 5 minutes late, but I mean to the beginning. I heard most.
Yeah. Okay, you should have shouted out.
Oh, you were doing a great job.
I didn't pay attention to who is there.
No, thank you. Raritan Valley Community College. I don't know if you saw their response today, late today.
I did,
but
yeah.
Okay, great. So
That's
they're
it.
definitely interested and they like the student to student talk and they are looking for a college student. So if Ira or anybody knows someone there, like they said, if a 4-year college student could talk to their, freshmen, sophomores, and they want something kind of very educational, if possible, some data, et cetera. They might be able to count it as credit for some of their students, extra credit, not, I guess,
Well,
less
that
credit.
would be interesting. Yes,
Yeah,
because I
so
never
that's a
thought of,
challenge.
but that means we have to reach out to someone who has the authorization to actually consider attendance of this as for credit.
Right, it wouldn't be it wouldn't be like regular course credit. She meant like extra credit to bump up your grades, like if you didn't do so good in a test or whatever. But the date they're looking at, she's got to get back. The date they're looking at is April 20th, because they don't have classes from, I think it was 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock
Mhm.
on April 20th. It might be another day, but it's probably going to be April 20th, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
and I'm thinking that we would have to have it as a recording and then, have it available.
Pre-record, you're saying?
Yeah, pre-record. I mean, we would have 1 or 2 live sessions at most. I'm not quite sure exactly what would be the best format, but I really like the concept that we would be targeting a demographic that definitely is not our church. That was our biggest problem historically, and that is very likely to adopt electric vehicles. Yes.
Yes, we could, I did offer that we could partner with them, so it's not just one student presenting. If, that we might be able to get Jersey BPU in there, we might be able to say something to kind of add,
Right,
maybe have like.
And yes, because we want to be represent the collaborative spirit. So,
Right.
BPU, yeah. I mean,
Also,
if somebody from the EPS, but
yeah. And I wanted to revisit an idea that I know Alex had spoken to last year, maybe for Endu. I called Duke Farmstead. I hadn't heard back from them on the request. But I called them like mid-afternoon, like it was almost 3 o'clock. So I didn't hear back. That's okay. I'll probably talk to her tomorrow.
Yes.
But they're going to lean more, from my experience with them, is they're going to lean more towards a virtual event, which is fine. Hopefully we could work out topics with them. But the other thing I wanted to bring up is maybe we can do a trip from Duke Farms. A small group of maybe 6, 8 of us do a trip from Duke Farms to maybe Washington Crossing, because they both have charging stations. And there's even a park in between that we could stop at if we wanted to, that has chargers. So maybe
why
we could do
not?
something.
Yes, we can do. And it would be nice to have at every stop some group of people or maybe journalists to cover it up. And
yeah, so something
report
along
it.
those. But it's let me work you guys on it via email and before we throw it out to the group to see how it sounds. Thank you.
Do we have anything else? Alex, you didn't say a word today. And now you turn off your camera. Okay.
Stan, I guess I wanted to add a potential event that we talked about a few months back.
Go ahead.
And this relates to the drive-in movies that have been happening in various places across New Jersey. I had mentioned that they have them, or were having them, at the Bell Works building in Homedale, New Jersey, and thought, coordinating an event there would be a possibility. They have not restarted those as of yet, but I'm expecting that they will. I assume in the next month or so.
Can you monitor that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if anything, just take a lead, because I cannot do everything.
Yeah, no, it should be pretty simple. Just coordinating with the organization there, picking a night and picking maybe an appropriate movie, but that's about it.
Good. Okay, what else? I think we are already behind. I mean, meeting more than 2 hours, that's very, I appreciate everyone who stayed by now. This is the longest meeting in a few months, and we still have more than 50% audience. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for everything you do for electric vehicles. Keep it up, stay positive, drive electric, and tell your neighbor, tell your family. And if you have any idea for Drive Electric Earth Day, let us know, okay? Thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thank you, Stan.